Hello everyone and welcome to Marie's Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. This week's video is a little bit different than anything I've ever done before. A lot of times when I'm making something, I think about filming it to show you guys, but I've never really done it until now. A few months ago, I made a 5-part series called the Freestyle Scrappy Tote Bag series, and it has been very popular based on the number of messages, emails, comments, etc. But above and beyond that bag series, the number one question I am asked about, and this is across the board from my very beginning until now, my life on YouTube has been, how do I sew crumbs together? Now, I have made quite a few bags and other works of art by sewing crumbs together. And a lot of you want to do that. You're just not sure how to go about it. One of my very first videos, it may have been the very first video, I sewed crumbs together. My lighting was bad, my camera angle was bad, and the name of the video was Sewing Crumbs Together, I think. So I thought it was about time to redo that video, but I didn't want to just do crumbs. So back in July, I needed to make a gift for my friend, and I was making her what I would call a freestyle scrappy tote bag out of red, white, and blue fabrics, okay? So I filmed this, and most of it is sped up. Now, this is not a tutorial, okay? I want to make that clear. If you know how to sew and you want to learn how to sew crumbs together, you're going to be able to catch on to what I'm doing. You will see what I'm doing. But I take you step by step the whole process. I don't leave anything out. So you may want to fast forward. You may not need the whole thing. You may not need this video at all. So I would kindly ask, if it's not for you, if this video is not for you, I really don't need a comment saying it's really long. It didn't need to be that long. This was for teaching people who don't know how to sew crumbs. So if you're past that, it's probably not the video for you. But I also, after the crumbs go together, I show how I made that bag for her. Now, I don't do it in detail, and as I said, it's not a tutorial. It's more a watch Marie kind of sew thing. What did I do? You know, it wasn't all filmed in one day, but I kind of left my camera going when I thought of it. There were a few parts I left out. So like I said, it's less of a tutorial, more just watch me sew, watch me make this up. But yeah, it's because I am asked so much, I thought, I'm going to do this. So I've had this video for a few months now, just kind of sitting on it. The other question for me was whether to release it in one part or two, because it is rather long. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to let it all go. And I'll leave it up to you guys. If you feel you want to watch the whole thing, watch the whole thing. If you only want to watch how I piece the crumbs together, just watch that. Maybe you don't need it at all, but it's going to be out there because I get asked about this all the time. So let's go take a look at this. All I did was film it. I did a voiceover later on, and you'll see how I sewed my friend's Freestyle Scrappy Americana tote bag. So let's go take a look at this, and I hope you enjoy. I really hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, please click the like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe, because I know that almost 70% of you aren't subscribers. You know you need the notifications to know when I put up a new video. Okay, let's get to it. Have you ever wondered what I do from beginning to end on one of these scrappy tote bags? Well, I'm going to let you have a peek inside my sewing room today. Here I am, just sewing random crumb scraps together. I just chose anything red, white, and blue that I had on hand, and if they weren't in the shape I wanted them, I trimmed them. The only shapes I work with when doing these types of bags are rectangles or squares. Sometimes I will use triangles and sew them together, but I didn't happen to do that on this one. And I realize that my fabric falls in behind my machine, and there are many ways to remedy that, but the reason I don't keep a piece of clear plastic there is because I am constantly taking that larger piece off my sewing machine. It's on and off all the time. I did used to have a piece of plastic there, and it just kept everything flowing smoothly past that little crevasse that everything falls into, but as I said, it just didn't work out for me, and that's okay too. Doesn't happen that way on my other machine, but this one was easier to film from. And again, this isn't a tutorial. It's more or less just giving you a peek into how I put things together. So I will talk through some of this, and other parts will be silent. I probably use more pins than I need, but that's just how I learned to do things, and that's what makes me happy. I love watching this process come together. I really had fun editing this video because I got to look back at my own process. Even though I was there when it happened, I get to see the whole bag panels come together from just their beginnings, just those tiny little scraps that I had all laid out. And there you can see me cutting apart with my blade saver all my little pieces, and that is the handiest thing ever, gifted to me from one of my wonderful subscribers. All right, so I always press my pieces and open them up before cutting them apart. And just to let you guys know, I laid out a whole bunch of scraps before I started this bag, and when I was done, I did not even have enough scraps left to make one of my open wide scrappy zippered bags, because I cut it right down just almost to the piece. I have enough scraps left over to make maybe a couple of postcards. So that was incredibly close on my part and not intended at all. Some people don't iron their scraps at this point. That's totally up to you. You definitely can if you want to. As I said, this really isn't a tutorial. I'm mostly just doing a voiceover to let you know what I was working on at any point in the video, because otherwise I was either going to have to set this to music, and personally 52 minutes of one song would be very monotonous. I didn't want to do that to you. But silence was kind of not a good thing either. So here I am just prepping more. I'll probably just let you watch the process here for a few more minutes. To me, this is relaxing sewing. I just love putting scraps together, crumb sewing. So as you can see, sometimes I take larger pieces and pin smaller pieces to them, but I'm kind of just putting everything together right now by size so that I've got it laid out. I know where all my pieces are if I need them. But I always trim everything straight. Some people don't get that picky. You can use scissors, totally up to you. I tend to like everything a little bit straight. That's okay. We all do what we're comfortable with. So I trimmed these out straight before matching pieces to go together. This project was something I did for a friend of mine. Her and I have been friends for over 30 years now, and she is blind. She was born on the 4th of July, and she wanted one of my scrappy Freestyle tote bags. She heard a lot of good things about my Tula Pink bag that I made for myself, and she dropped a lot of hints about wanting one in her colors. So I couldn't not do it, right? And it's funny because I ended up making this for her birthday, which her birthday is the 4th of July, and I made it the week of the 4th of July. So color-wise, it fit right in with the theme of that week for sure. as you can see on my left hand is my safety glove, and another wonderful subscriber gifted me those gloves. I have a pair and they aren't cut proof. I mean, you can cut yourself on that blade, but it's one of those things that will protect you from the worst of a cut if you do happen to hit your hand with your rotary blade. Looks like I'm cutting very fast, doesn't it? This is on 8 times the speed. I'm just a whirlwind. Look at me go. Lots of trimming, but it really didn't take me that long, and it is kind of fun to do it, you know, kind of mindless work, and I love it when I get to put all my scraps together into the bigger pieces. That's one thing that I really enjoyed when I watched this video back, was to start from the smaller pieces that I start with and end up with those large, I think they were almost 17-inch panels when I was done. I just love watching everything come together. Okay, strapping on my pins again onto my wrist and beginning the process again of fitting scraps together. And that's where I take longer pieces sometimes and hook 1 or 2 pieces that are already joined onto there. Just helps it come together better. I did that with the beach themed bag that I made a month or 2 ago. It's a good way to put crumbs together, and I mean, you could use the same method for making a crumb quilt. I've done the same thing making blocks. I love making crumb blocks for quilts. It's a wonderful way to use up a lot of your scraps. So this method works for so many things, not just a tote bag, but for anything you might want to make. There's very little waste. You can match things up not only by how well they'll look together, but you can match them up by size of your crumb scraps. I just try not to put 2 like fabrics together. As long as they're not the same fabric, they can go side by side. I just don't want the same fabric next to each other. Other than that, there's no rules. And if we could all sew this fast, can you imagine how much we would get done? Wow. We'd accomplish a lot at 8 times regular speed. Wow. Just matching. I trim off those little pieces and they go right back in the scrap pile, where they will go into fabric postcards or other scrappy bags or quilt blocks. You can't waste anything around here. And I will chain piece these as well right through the machine, just as I did the first pieces, and you'll see me doing that in a few minutes. Not very many pieces left there. I was trying to judge how many I would need for the bag, and as I said, I came really close on this project. I was really amazed. There's the pile, and back to the sewing machine I go. just chain piecing. And in case anyone is wondering, I just had some cotton thread, top and for the bobbin. I believe it was a 40 weight thread. And I believe I was using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length on this. That would work, something smaller would work, whatever you like to use for your general piecing. And take the pins out again and cut the pieces apart. They're getting bigger each time. Pretty soon, won't take long and I'll have my panels made. Yay! That is the handiest little cutter. You get to use your old rotary cutter blade in there. And they're called a blade saver. And if I remember it, I will leave a link down below. And again, I press these before cutting them apart. Just makes it easier. Some might not find it necessary to do the ironing, but that's just me. I do. And to any of you who are like, wow, she's doing a lot of sewing, this was not filmed all in one day. This was filmed over 3 days' time, so I didn't do this all at once. I'm sure there are people who could. I'm just not one of them. This is just called the magic of film. I can make it look whatever I want it to look like. Some of those scraps I have had since 2001. I actually remember the quilt that I bought them for. And I had some little scraps. I still have a few little scraps of the red, white, and blue. The flag fabric, I have a little bit left. I remember when I purchased it, and it's funny how we hold on to scraps for a long time sometimes. I had a scrap. When I first started my channel, I made a postcard video, because I've made more than one, but in the postcard video, I believe it was the first one, I had a little scrap of fabric from our oldest granddaughter's quilt that I made her when she was just a little one. And I had one little piece of fabric left from that quilt, and I found it, so I made it. I made the postcard for her with that one little scrap from her quilt in it. So she picked that out of the crowd the minute she got her postcard. She knew where that fabric had been. It was just a lavender calico fabric, I guess you'd call it. All right. Now it's time to cut these apart again. Trim, trim. Can't forget my glove. I don't need to cut myself. That's the last thing I need. I've seen so many of you who have made the tote bags in one way or another. Down below this video there is a link Actually, there are 7 links below this video. 5 of them go to what I call the Freestyle Freestyle Scrappy Tote Bag series, and there's 5 videos in that series showing you how to make your own scrappy tote bag. And you can choose pockets, you can choose whatever it is you want to do. You don't have to have a pocket, you don't have to have a zipper. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. But the links below will give you a starting point if you're new here to my channel. If you are, welcome aboard. But either way, the links will be down below. There's 5 in the Scrappy Freestyle Tote Bag series. Then there's a Scrappy Strip Tote Bag video and an Autumn Tote Bag video where I just used Charm Pack in autumn colors. Of course, you could make it in any color you want. And they're all basically the same tote bag style. I gave you more options in the Freestyle as far as whether to use a zipper on the top for a closure or a magnetic clasp, Velcro, leave it open. That's why I called it Freestyle, because it was whatever you wanted it to be. Now it's time to start putting them together like a jigsaw puzzle again. And I find it best just to lay them out a little bit, just see what I have available. Try to keep different shapes and colors going a different way. And as I said, the only rule I really have is I don't like to use the same fabric next to each other. And I just throw a couple of pins in there to hold everything where I want it to be. Make my next stack. These are so fun to make. And of course, you wouldn't have to use themed scraps. You could just grab your scrap pile and go with whatever you have in there, and it really wouldn't matter. As you can see, I often turn things 5 or 6 times around, just trying to find exactly which way I want them to go or which way I feel will look best. And I forgot to film my sewing, but I'm sure you know how I sewed that line. Wow, look at me go. Quick, quick. That is such a handy little ironing board that my husband made for me. It used to be a little tray table. We put some cotton batting over top of it and stapled some home decor fabric that I had. Stapled it nice and tight over many layers of cotton batting, and it is a great little ironing board. And again, I trim things up if they need it, and I don't if they don't. But most of them I do like to have a nice straight edge. Again, as long as it's close, it probably isn't all that necessary, but I like the back of my projects to look as neat as the fronts of my projects. So Some of us strive for perfection. Well, I shouldn't say perfection. I am far from a perfectionist, but I like my scraps to look good. I wish the light would not reflect in my ruler, but it does every time. The age-old problem of reflections in our plastic rulers. It happens to the best of us. Or it happens to all of us. I shouldn't say the best of us. I'm not the greatest YouTuber out there. As you notice, sometimes I lose 3/4 of an inch or an inch off the edge of something, but it's a small sacrifice, as well as I save anything over an inch wide for my postcards, so I'm not really throwing anything away. Just laying everything out for size, because at this point I'm working towards getting everything to over 16 inches was my goal. I wanted it to be about 16.5 or 17 inches square, so that's the goal I was working towards at that point. Takes less and less time now that they're getting bigger. It's going faster. I apologize for the sound outside of our place. The minute I start recording, we've got trucks going through revving their engines and kids screeching, but hey, it's summertime. What can you do? Much larger pieces, that's always good to see. Means I'm getting closer to the end so I can get to the next part. I've been asked if I pull the fabric through my machine. No, I don't. I know sometimes I guide it with my hand and it may look that way, but I let the machine do all the work of pulling the fabric through. There go those reflections again. Wow, look at this. The panels are coming together. That's so exciting. Lots of beautiful scraps go into these. Just trying to find a way so I didn't have too many repeats of fabrics close together. This one was just a little shorter than what I needed, so I took a couple of those spare pieces that I had, put one on each end. Beautiful panels now that they're come together. Normally I spray them with some magic sizing or spray starch at this point. I didn't have it out that day for whatever reason. That's okay, it comes out fine either way. Really made a bright panel. I didn't know if I was going to like this bag when I first laid my scraps out, but I really did. When it was all said and done, I really liked this bag. I told my friend when I got it made that I was going to keep it. I was teasing her that I was going to keep it. I wouldn't have. I was just telling her that I wanted to. One more time for old time's sake. But we're in the home stretch. Almost done trimming it all off. Oh, a little bit short. See what we'll do with this one. Lots more of what we've already done, and I am so close to having these front two panels done. Look at all those beautiful scraps, rectangles, squares, all different shapes and sizes. I was just checking for width, which way I should lay it so not too many are next to the same fabric, or not any if I can help it. Pin it together for one last sewing before I can layer it up with my cotton batting and my fabric. Let's see what we have here. Trimming it down. I believe I left these at about 17 inches, give or take, because my squares I actually cut down to 16.5 when I was done quilting and ready to sew them together. Of course, depending on the size bag that a person makes, it could be different. So here I am laying a piece of muslin down. It was the only light colored fabric I had, a piece of 100% cotton batting, and my panels, my quilted panels. I am lifting up to spray it with some basting spray in between so that I don't have to pin. And in this instance I was using Spray and Bond brand basting adhesive, and it just keeps your layers together while you're quilting. So I lay everything together and just pull half of it up, give it a quick spritz with it, and move onward. That's what I'm doing there. It's hard to see on the speed that I'm actually spraying something, but I am opening up, spraying, and spraying in between each layer. And you may wonder, if I use a lining, why I'm using fabric underneath there. I think it just gives it a little more stability. It also is easier on my machine, I believe, because it doesn't leave all the lint underneath my machine as if the cotton batting were down below there. Now I'm marking lines with a pencil every inch for my serpentine stitch line, and you'll see me go back in a minute with a pen, and I am marking every ½ inch with a different color. And that's because I chose on every inch to use white thread, and on every ½ inch I went red, blue, red, blue. So actually my thread colors went white, red, white, blue, white, red, white, blue in serpentine stitch all the way across my bag panels, and they looked terrific. It wasn't something I had planned at first. It's when I started making my markings that I decided to do that. So you won't see me change thread color, but that's what I did. So again, I quilted the serpentine stitch every inch with white thread, and in between there on the ½ inch alternating red and blue cotton thread. And I had 2 pens run out of ink during this process. It ended up being a fun day for trying to get a pen to work. And I didn't worry if it was a regular pen or a quilt marking pen, because I'm going to have a lining in this. None of those lines that I made are going to show, which is another benefit of using a piece of fabric in behind here. I like using the quilting, the serpentine stitch for quilting on these. You can choose any width or length of stitch. Sometimes I go 6.5 and for my stitch width, and then a length at 2.5 millimeter. Oops, ran out of bobbin thread there. There we go. Keep right on stitching. And And this quilting was not done all in one sitting either, as that would be quite a long time to sit there and quilt. For me it is anyway. I can't do things for that long of a time. If you can, that is great. I used to be able to. It's not something I can do any longer, but as I said, through the magic of video, we can make it look like it's all in one sitting. Okay, let's trim this out. I always leave extra batting. Oh, pretty, pretty. Trim these all square. Okay, now I'm making a quilted pocket. I'm choosing to use a serpentine stitch to quilt it, and I simply went around the perimeter of it, and then just without measuring, I just kind of kept going inside each line, getting smaller with each turn. I just wanted to make sure it was quilted, and this just happened to be what I did at the time, and it worked out all right. I never plan these kinds of things. I was actually just going to free motion quilt it, and then I had this idea, so I ran with it. And that's only one layer of cotton batting. I'm going to divide this pocket into 3 openings, 2 larger on either side and the one in the middle. Not that it will be small, but it will be smaller. My friend is blind. She needs a good sized pocket for her cane, and that's what my idea is, making the larger pockets on the sides, as well as the reason why I quilted it. I figured it would make it sturdier to hold up to years of sliding the cane in and out of her bag. So flipping everything right side out, poking my corners out, clipping my threads, pressing the pocket. And I had some marking pens, but I thought I would use my white chalk to mark my pens. And here I am centering everything on my lining. The red is my lining for the pocket, or for the bag, as you can tell. I came down, I think 3.5 inches on that, but give or take. As I said, this really isn't a tutorial. It's more of a watch Marie sew and listen to her gab while she sews. And you'll see my foot back and forth, back and forth. That's because I go forward as I'm stitching around, and then I will back stitch a few stitches. You'll see this along the bottom and sides, forward, back, forward, back. I just feel that reinforces my stitching. I do the same thing at my start and stop points on pockets. I feel it just gives them more strength. Forward and back along the same stitch lines. Yes, I could sew over it twice, but basically what I'm doing is going 3 stitches forward, 1 stitch back, that kind of thing, just reinforcing it. Finding the center on this one. This is going to be a welt pocket. So this one's going to have a zipper. I cut my zippers at about 11 inches if I remember correctly. My openings were 10. And this is just another way. I showed this in the Freestyle tote bag series, how to make these pockets. On this bag, I made one on the outer and on the lining, as she had requested 2 of them. I used a white number 5 zipper with rainbow colors in it. I had a nice flower zipper pull. The pinning always makes it look a little wonky until you get it sewn, but trust the process, it will work. And I sewed it with a 2.5mm stitch length, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And again, on the ends of my zipper, I go back and forth a little bit there to reinforce my stitches. There's that. All right, and here's the same kind of pocket, but on the one of the outside panels. whereas the first one was during a lining, or using a lining. And I don't show it in here, but I did put one of my Marie's Scrappy Creations labels on the bag. I have a peel off paper, so I peel the paper off, I touch it with the heat of the iron, and then I stitch around it in white. I left a little over an inch around opening here so that I could stitch around. Right, there's my front and back panels, right sides facing. I'm pinning on 3 sides. Oh goodness, we're ready to make straps. So I just cut some lengths of 4-inch wide scraps that I had that matched with the bag and sewed those together. And as you'll see, I'm going to trim the triangles off here in a minute, pin them up, and those can go in the scrap pile for my next bag or quilt block adventure where I need them, because they are they'll make a perfect square. So I have folded this into 4, and then I line 2 narrow strips of cotton batting, 1 on each side. You can use 1 if you like. I personally like to use 2. I feel it gives the strap more substance, more to hold on to. And I cut that a little better than 3/4 of an inch wide, but not quite an inch. So yeah, you wanted about 7/8 of an inch or so. You just need to be able to tuck that down in there without it buckling up through there. Folding that over, lining it up, and pinning it in place, and I'll take it to the sewing machine. When I do, I'm going to use a 3mm stitch length, stitching very close to the edge, a little closer than 1/8 of an inch, and then I will go down through the center with a serpentine stitch after stitching both sides. Not much easier than making these straps. Really doesn't get any easier. They're very quick way to do them. And I like having scrappy straps, especially if I have scraps all over the bag. It just seems to make sense to pair that bag with scrappy straps. Of course, you could certainly use yardage or just one color. If you have it, it's not going to hurt a thing. It's just what I happen to choose and what I happen to like. But to each their own, everyone likes what they like. And these straps were about 34 inches long. I lose an inch on each when I place them because I place each one on the top of the bag with about a 1/2 inch sticking out over. So here I am using a 3mm stitch length, very close to the edge, removing my pins as I go, so the first side is always a bit slower than the second side is. Take those pins out, because the one time you don't, you will hit it with your needle, and nobody needs that, because guess what I did in the middle of this project? I bent a needle. It came out of there looking like an upside down question mark, and I was questioning what made me think I could get away with that, because a lot of times you can. I've done enough projects where I have sewn slowly over my pins thinking that I can do it and I'm not going to hit anything, but you know, it doesn't always work that way. Okay, so here I go back, much quicker going back. All the pins are gone, sewing very close to the edge. Once I get up to the other end and both sides are sewn, I'll go down through the middle with a serpentine stitch. You could use a straight stitch or 2 straight stitches through the center. I just find that it holds the cotton batting down well when you do. And you may have noticed, you may not have, that I pieced some cotton batting in there. I butted the ends together, but this helps hold everything in place and keep it in place through future washings and just using it in day-to-day life. So we like to keep everything stitched and quilted as well as we can. It makes for a good quality product, and that's what we want to give to people, is a good quality product. Okay, and as you can see, I skipped over the part where I put the magnetic clasp in. As I said, this isn't a tutorial and I didn't film everything. I am putting in a D-ring per her request so she can clip her keys on, and that's just a few inches down from the top of the lining. So I pin around there, and then I will decide where I want to leave my opening, and I always mark it with my pins going in the opposite direction. Placing my handles, I always use safety pins to hold the straps down straight, because if they do not stay straight when you sew over them at the top, they can be a little bit wonky, and nobody wants their straps to not be straight. We want straight straps. So I use the safety pins. I also stay stitch. I just go over those top pieces. As you can see, they're sticking out about a ½ inch over the top. I pin everything down. Okay, right sides together. Pinning everything close. Look at all that quilting. What a nice looking bag. I really do like this bag, as if you couldn't tell. I'm very pleased with it. But of course, when we put this much time, effort, and love into something, we do tend to get attached to it now, don't we? So I sew around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance around both the lining and the outer. And then I believe I cut them at 1 3/4, yeah, 1 3/4 inches square. So we cut those out to box the corners and make a nice opening bag. You want to have a good pair of sharp scissors for that. This is not the place for a dull pair of scissors, and I always use one of my squares to measure to make sure that that is exactly what I have measured, because you don't need a different measurement. That would not be good. Make sure you use a nice tight stitch on this, and again I go back and forth going over my stitches. This is not the place where you want to have your stitches come apart. Nice and snug. Same thing here. And I know this all goes a little fast, and as I've said more than once, this really isn't a tutorial. Even though I am explaining what I'm doing, I'm more or less doing it so that it's not just silence and you get bored. So I am checking that out. As you can see, I have the opening to turn my bag right side out. I left the opening, so I put them right sides together. My lining went inside my bag. The lining was right side out. The outer bag was inside out, and I just stitched around. Now I am sewing my two edges, box corners together. You can see this in my videos. It keeps it so that when you grab something from your bag, the lining does not come out with the bag. Flip it right side out. Then all we have to do is close that opening and top stitch, and we'll be done. Yay! Look at that. Wow, it looks like a red, white, and blue blob. But I can make magic, and you can too. You're going to get to see that USA pocket on the outside. You didn't get to see much of that during the filming because, as I said, I couldn't film every part of this. But there I am straightening the top, just making sure everything at the top is is laying how it should before I top stitch, and I do press that before I pin. You just didn't see. I just make sure that's laying correctly before I put the pins in there and top stitch. And when I top stitch, I've got that 1/2 inch of the handle that went out over the top, so that grabs along in that stitching. And there it is. Wow, look at that. All those scraps all sewn together to make such a wonderful looking bag. Isn't that amazing? Yay! I'm glad you watched this with me, and if you haven't made your own, I hope I've inspired you to do so. There's that D-ring, clip the keys onto, and the zippered pocket. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, hanging out with me.